Good morning, everyone. The webinar will now begin. Thank you for joining us today. This is Christy Schmidt, Assistant Director of Communications and Knowledge Exchange with Farm Credit East. Before we get started, we have a few technology tips to keep in mind while you're viewing today's webinar. First off, all attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. Every once in a while, be sure to tap your mouse so that your screen doesn't go to sleep. And all questions will be held to the end of the presentation. You can text chat your questions in though throughout the presentation. On the right side of your screen, there should be a red arrow. Just expand that, and then there'll be a little text chat box, and the questions will come to up here. And like I said, we'll hold them all to the end. If you can't attend the full presentation today, a recording will be available on farmcrediteast.com/webinars by Monday for playback at a later time. If you're having any trouble accessing this recording, feel free to contact me at 800-562-2235. And now I'll pass it over to Jim Putnam to get started.
Good morning, and thank you, Christy. I want to welcome everybody on board this morning. I know there's lots of things you could be doing in your farming operations, but safety is always a critical topic that we ought to be thinking about. And I am going to take liberty and rename our webinar this morning. And I know what motivates all of us to get something done, and that is, a compliance type activity. But I think the real goal here is to keep our employees, our family, and ourselves safe as we enjoy this wonderful occupation of farming here in the Northeast. And that really is the emphasis today, not so much on the enforcement part of it. We have co-sponsors here today. This is an activity that we at Farm Credit are very proud to work with a number of farm organizations to bring this information to you. So it's NEDPA, Northeast Dairy Producers Association, a great group that we do a lot of different activities together with. New York Farm Bureau, certainly another organization that provides leadership on public policy issues and a whole lot more. New York Pro Dairy, and our second speaker is going to be Carl Zimick from that group, and again, a partner that we do a lot of different things with, and we are very pleased to be affiliated with. A group that we don't do as much with, but is very vital to New York, or to Northeast agriculture, but especially New York, and that's the New York Center for Agricultural Medicine and Health, and obviously a big stakeholder and leader in this effort, and they are affiliated with the Bassett Healthcare Network. So again, I wanted to get those names in. This is a joint effort of organizations, all committed to improving safety, occupational safety in Northeast agriculture. So thank you to those groups. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. His name is Ron Williams. His official title is Compliance Assistant Specialist with the U.S. Department of Labor and the OSHA Division. And Ron is a return speaker. He did this seminar for us last summer and did an excellent job. And I think you're going to really find his approach this morning common sense, safety focused. I think there'll be some takeaways for all of us. I know when I listened to him last summer, most of the things were things that we probably know better on, but it's good to get a reminder. But some of them were, geez, I never thought of it that way, and that's a good pickup. So he's got great information. He's very practical. He knows his way around a dairy farm. He's not somebody who just happened to be reassigned. His roots in dairy farming go way back to being a teenager working on farms. And also very impressed, he's a member of his local volunteer firefighting department, and that's always a wonderful calling as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ron Williams. Welcome back, Ron. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Yes?
Yes, we can. Looks good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for letting me return to do an update on the OSHA requirements for dairy farms. I appreciate that. With that, as I stated earlier in my presentation back in September, I am with the Syracuse area office, OSHA, and showing you on that map in front of you now, showing you local in Syracuse, New York. Big change, we're going to talk some changes today in our discussions. There again, we're going to talk about the OSHA inspection process, some updates with that. We're going to talk about some updates with the hazards in the dairy operations, and we're going to take your questions and answers. So with, as far as update-wise, I want to talk about the enforcement exception and limitations under the Appropriations Act. There again, we're talking specific to dairy farm operations. And with our limitations as far as doing inspections on dairy farms, the first thing we look for, we come to your establishment, is we're going to question you all as farmers. We're going to ask you, you as a farmer, have you had 10 or fewer employees currently at any times during the last 12 months? So meaning maybe July 1st you had 6, and then maybe October 1st you had 12 or 15. But how many employees have you had at one time? And a lot of confusion that we're seeing out there is I'll be talking with a farmer and he'll tell me, oh yeah, during the first cutting of haying, I had Bill, Joe, and numerous other employees helping me. And then when I did my second cutting, I had Bill and Joe in here, but I had Tim and Bob working for me. And I'm having farmers add up the total at both from both different times. It's not that. We're only getting the total from that one specific day. So July 1st, you had 6 employees. That's the number of employees you had. Or August 1st, you had 8 employees. That's the total we're looking for, not adding up the total from all throughout the year. So I've seen some confusion with that, with talking with farmers throughout the state. Also, family members of farms employers are not counted when determining number of employees. We do not count family members, and as it states at the bottom of that slide, a part-time employee is counted as 1 employee. And then further clarification, when we're talking about asking the farmer if they'd had an active temporary labor camp during the preceding 12 months. Key with that, we had many questions that we asked as far as definition of temporary labor camp. The key here for further clarification that we received from Washington, only 2 questions we're going to ask specific to if you've had a temporary labor camp. So number 1 there, employees are employed for a set period of time. So if you're hiring an employee on for a set period of time, you're bringing additional employees to your farm either to do harvesting, haying, birthing of cows. You're bringing them for a specific time period. And number 2, those employees that you're bringing on for that temporary specific time period, they're required to live in housing at your facility, at your farm. So those are 2 key questions that we're asking when we're looking to see if you've had a temporary labor camp in the past 12 months. So we start counting your employees, and there again, taking a look, our definition are at the top, immediate family members, direct relationship to the employer. So if they're parents or spouse or child, we're not going to count them. So we're looking for total number of employees you've had at any one time the last 12 months, not counting the family members, and you've not had, if you had a temporary labor camp, but if you had a temporary labor camp, the temporary labor camp are for employees are there for a set period of time. They're not the hired hand that you're bringing, that you've hired on to do milking from you, and you don't know when they're going to leave your establishment or move on to the next job. You've hired them for your establishment as a permanent employee, then they're not temporary. They're not there for a set time period. Also, next slide here with the immigration status. There again, we're not going to acquire the status of that employee. As far as our priorities, and there again, these priorities have not changed since OSHA came into existence in 1970. If we get a call, imminent danger, because there again, we get hundreds of calls at our office every day. So we may get a call at our office saying we've got employees on a farm, maybe changing out the shingles on the barn. They're up on a barn and they're up off the ground 30, 40 feet in the air with no fall protection. We may act on that and come out to that farm and take a look at that operation and to see if we have employees exposed to imminent danger. Also, next priority is going to be a fatality or catastrophe. So our next slide showing here, if one of your employees is killed on the job at your farm, or you have 3 or more of your employees that actually admitted to the hospital, you need to contact OSHA. And listen there at the bottom of the screen, you got a caller number 1-800-321-6742. You must contact us. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, give us a call. There again, that phone is manned 24/7. You need to call us. Our next priority is a referral. So maybe it wasn't a fatality at your farm, or maybe it wasn't a catastrophe where 3 or more employees were admitted to the hospital. Maybe one of your employees just received a severe cut, or maybe an amputation. And now, what's your policy procedure in case you have an emergency or an accident that happens at your farm? Well, I'm assuming you're going to call 911, and then as soon as you call 911, you're going to have the fire department, probably the ambulance, and the police department coming to your farm. And then once that police officer starts asking questions at your farm, they're going to make a determination, was this accident, was this criminal intent, meaning was one employee who just struck another employee, or was this actually a farm accident? And once that police officer makes a determination, this was in fact a farm accident, they're going to make a determination. It's not under their jurisdiction, but they're going to contact OSHA. They're going to contact us to come out and do an investigation. And again, once we come to your location, we're going to make a determination. Have you had 11 or more employees at your establishment in the last 12 months? Or maybe you didn't have 11 or more employees. You had 10 or less. And then the next question is, did you have an active temporary labor camp? And if you didn't have a temporary labor camp, you didn't meet the requirements, as I discussed earlier, then we're going to leave your farm. We're not going to come and do inspection on your farm. And also be aware there's other agencies can make a referral to us. It could be even listed on the bottom where it says immediate referral. Maybe it was a slow day and you had one news agency was out cruising around looking to develop a story, and now you got a couple of your employees up on top of your roof replacing those shingles or doing an unsafe act, and now you allow them to take a picture, and that shows up in local newspaper. We're going to take that as immediate referral. Or, as it also states here, it could be one of our compliance officers who says the CSHO, that's the COSHO, Compliance and Safety Health Officer, is just happen to be driving by your dairy farm, and they actually see a hazard from the road. They're going to stop in and take a look at your operation. Next could be a complaint. Maybe one of your employees or a current family member of one of the employees working at your farm is concerned about hazards ongoing at your establishment. And they've come to you as the owner, they've come to the manager at that farm, and they can't get those conditions corrected. They have the right to make a formal complaint to OSHA to come out and do an investigation. Now, if it's not a current employee or a family member employees working at that establishment, and there again, as I stated before, we get hundreds of calls at our office every day. You know, ex-employee, disgruntled employee was just fired. Maybe your next door neighbor that's upset about the operation that's going on at your farm. You get those calls every day. And once we make a determination that they're not a current employee, a family member, or representative employees working at your establishment, we're going to handle that as a formal complaint. We're going to handle that via fax and phone. So we're going to take that information from that person who's calling us, and then we're going to call you as a farm. We're going to make you aware, hey, we've received a complaint about safety and health conditions at your establishment. We don't know if they're true or false, but we're going to fax over to you, or if you don't have a fax machine, we'll mail a letter over to you and just need you to respond back to us within 5 working days. As long as we receive a satisfactory response, we'll close it out, and we're not coming to your farm. As far as those inspections that I was talking about, so I was talking about unplanned visit. So you had a fatality, a catastrophe, we received a referral from a police department, or received a formal complaint. Those are all unplanned, unprogrammed activities. Now let's talk about a planned inspection, a program planned inspection, as shown on the screen here. These are general schedule planned inspections where we actually go out and target industries that have a high injury illness rate. And the one that's going to concern you all is down 3/4 down the way of the page, emphasis program. We have a local emphasis program for inspecting dairy farms operations. And specific with that, we have guidelines we follow to inspect a local dairy farm operation. And with that, the local dairy farm operations, as shown here, farming operations is exempt from OSHA enforcement activities under this local emphasis program if it, 2 items here. So number 1, employs 10 or fewer employees currently at all times during the last 12 months, and 2, be aware temporary labor camps are exempt under the local emphasis program. So we're not even going to ask you, under this local emphasis program, we're not even going to ask you if you have had a temporary labor camp. The only thing we're going to key in on is have you had 11 or more employees in the last 12 months. So if you only have 10 or less employees, and as I stated before, we're not going to count your family members. If you have 10 or less employees at any one time in the last 12 months, we're not going to do a program plan inspection under this local emphasis program of your farm. So just to review, as I talked about back in September, the last of this presentation, compliance officer is going to come to your farm. We're going to come to your milk house, your main office, wherever you're located. They're going to present their credentials, like shown at the bottom right there, and sit down with you, have an opening conference, and explain this is why we're here. We're here because you called us because you had a fatality or a catastrophe. We're here because we received a referral from a police agency, or we're here because we're driving down the road and we saw your employees up on a roof with no fall protection. This is why we're here. And during that open conference, we're going to ask you specific to tell us how many employees you've had in the last 12 months, ask you specific questions. And then with that, we're going to take a look at all your records, all your programs, and then we're going to do a walk-around inspection of your farm, gathering information, talking with the employees, looking to see if employees are exposed to any hazards. And then once we've completed that walk-around inspection, we're going to sit down with you, do a closing conference, and review anything alleged hazard that we found during that walk-around inspection, and sit down with you and discuss how much time you need to correct those conditions. So with that, I have listed here are the 12 hazards that have been identified on dairy farms. So these are the key 12 hazards that those compliance officers are going to be looking for when they do that walk-around inspection at your farm. So with that, let's go through these. So number 1, talking about manure storage facilities and collection structures. Now there again, we do not have a specific standard for manure storage facilities and collection structures, so we have to reference the 5A1 of the General Duty Clause of the OSHA Act. And there again, because we do not have a specific agricultural standard, we have to reference the OSHA Act, and under the OSHA Act, it's the responsibility under the 5A1 for employers to provide safe and health work conditions for their employees. So in order for us to cite a 5A1, number one, we have to show that there's a serious hazard. In this case, we have a fatal or serious drowning hazard may exist, where employees driving the farm vehicles, the skid steers, mower trucks may be exposed and operate in near proximity to these structures. And then, do we have any measures, any control measures in place to prevent these pieces of equipment from going into and being exposed to these drowning hazards? So as it states our number one, looking for a safety stop and or gate at the manure push-off ramp and load-out areas to prevent accidental entry of machinery. And then we have to reference a consensus document. So when you cite a 5A1, we have to reference a consensus document where there's a requirement to provide protection for the employees. So in this case, the bottom left shows you a guidance document, American Society of Agriculture and Biological Engineers, EP 470.1. And then specific under that document, section 6.1.5, all push-off platforms or piers for open below-ground manure storage structures need a barrier strong enough to stop a slow-moving tractor or skid steer. Also with those manure storage facilities and structures, looking for at the farm to put up warning signs, fences, ladder, ropes, barrels, rails, and other devices to restrict the accidental passage of vehicles and personnel across these locations. So there again, looking at a guidance document for these manure storage safety, and under specific section 6.1.6, open storage should be fenced in unless they're above ground tanks, and warning signs should be posted. And reading down below there, then the warning signs, post a warning sign located on the fence near the entry gate that prohibits entry to the storage should be posted. An example of that on the sign, do not enter, drowning hazard. So danger manure storage, danger keep out. And as is shown on the right, it needs to be in the language of the employees that can understand. So if we English, or if they speak Spanish, then we need a sign in Spanish so the employees understand the dangers of these locations. Also with that, do the employees need to enter into these? So like shown here in this illustrative photo at the bottom left, do they have to open up a pit where they have to replace out a pump? Now in this case, if they got to get down into that space to replace that pump, now the employees are exposed to a fatal or serious inhalation hazard of gases. So hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia may exist where the manure gases are generated through the handling or liquid semi-solid manure through activities such as pumping, mixing, agitating, spreading, or cleaning out these spaces. There again, over on the right-hand side, as far as a recommendation to assist you in developing a program and how you're going to test this space, how you're going to train employees to go into these spaces, you could follow a consent. You could follow one of our general industry standards. In this case, list 1910.146. And then showing here some photos looking at our structures and our manure lagoons. So putting some fencing around that location to keep employees out of there, putting up some signage, making them aware of the dangers. Also, again, with our entry concerns, what do you have at your establishment? So is it an above ground tank? Is it a pit? Is it a lagoon? What are we doing to protect our employees at these locations? Or here, taking a look at, are you using a tractor, and are you using a tractor for pumping to the lagoon? Is this a tractor that's used, you're going to be driving on this tractor, so now we have to provide a route structure as shown there in the illustration to protect employees. Or here, actually showing our tanker backed up to that lagoon, and you're going to pump that out. Or what do we have in place to stop that tanker from backing into that lagoon? In this case, showing you actually did occur in this case, where actually the tanker did back into that lagoon, and showing you actually here where a worker actually had to exit while the tires were still turning. So the key here is preventing that tractor and wagon from backing into that lagoon, putting up a stop, in this case showing you a stop log to stop a slow-moving tractor from backing into the lagoon. Or here, where you could actually put onto the tanker itself an extension, so it's actually guarding by distance. It's away from the edge of that lagoon. Okay, number 2, dairy, bull, and cow behavior. So worker positioning. So with that, employees being exposed to a fatal or serious crush-by hazard may exist where employees interact with those dairy bulls and cows without appropriate training on dairy, bull, and cow behavior, and or work in areas where there is an increased likelihood of becoming caught between the animals and a fixed or moving structure such as a fence, gate, corral, or opening the gates or crowd gate. So if we come to your establishment, and as shown on the right, we're going to take a look and see if you've actually had accidents with employees who were struck by the bulls or cows. Have you done any training to make the employees of how to handle these cows and these bulls? Do you have any warning signs in place? And what are your specific safety policies and procedures for handling these cows? And here, showing you actually handling the bulls, we actually put up some warning signs, now restricting access into these areas. Have we sat down with employees and say, if you're in a situation inside that barn, do we actually have an escape route to get out of harm's way? Maybe you're using nose rings with your bulls, or you actually removed those aggressive bulls so the employees don't have that exposure. And again, have you taken a look? And there again, there's many publications out there. This one here is showing you a livestock handling guide, sitting down with employees, training employees on how to handle the cows, the bulls, just having a discussion with them as far as how to handle them, where to position yourself as far as specific to the flight zone. What are you doing to protect employees? What are you doing to train the employees? Or you actually may have a crowd gate in the milking parlor, and our employees trained how to properly use that gate. Are they trained to where to position themselves so they're not getting caught or struck by? Number 3, our electrical systems. There again, we do not have specific agricultural standard. So again, we have to look into Site A 5A1, as I stated before, in the general duty clause, employees must provide safe conditions for the employees. So in this case, employees are exposed to a serious electrocution, electrical shock hazards. They're again making direct contact with improperly installed electrical equipment, maybe unguarded disconnects, switches, circuit breakers, pumps. Okay, protecting those employees from exposure to those energized parts. And it could be parts that have been damaged by the cattle themselves, the cows themselves, or the boxes themselves, where maybe you did some electrical work, you didn't put the knockouts back on, or then now the cover plates are missing, or they actually were damaged by the animals. And here showing a lot of illustrations here where we got covers missing on electrical panels, junction boxes with the covers off, knockouts missing. On top right there, we've got extension cords with broken off ground pins, frayed wires, or even the bottom right, we have use of plug strips. There again, these plug strips are great for low voltage wiring, but once you start putting pieces of equipment, anything that generates heat, draws a lot of amps. These things melt down, they short out. Or even here, I'm going to walk over to your electrical panel. Open up the panel, swing it open on the illustration on the left-hand side there, looking at the directory. Is it labeled to what the circuit breakers control? Or do we have a circuit breaker that's marked spare and it's in the on position? What does it control? And then showing you on the right-hand side of the photo there, we've got actual circuit breakers are missing. So now an employee goes to flip a circuit breaker on or off, their finger slips off, and now they just made contact with the energized bus bar. You need to protect all energized parts. Number 4, skid steers. A lot of skid steers being used on farms. There again, do not have the specific standard for skid steers. So again, we're referencing a 5A1. There again, looking at a serious hazard, being crushed by, struck by, caught in between. We want to ensure that all employees are trained on proper use of these skid steers, loaders, and make sure they're trained according to manufacturer's instructions. And you should have a copy of the operator's manual for all pieces of equipment that are being used on the farm. But specifically here with the skid steers, employees need to be properly trained, and as states under 3, we can't be bypassing any of the safety features on those units, specific to the alarms, the seat belts, and that control interlock system needs to be maintained. As far as to assist you in doing training with employees, you could take a look as a best practice one of our general industry standards, which is 1910-178, and there it talks about operator training, reevaluating employees on a 3-year basis, and actually putting together and doing documentation and certifying those employees. Number 5, tractor operations. Now this is the first one that I've gone over with you all. We actually have a Pacific agricultural standard. There again, agricultural standards under 29 CFR, which is Code of Federal Regulations, 1928. So listed here on the right-hand side, we actually have specific requirements under agricultural standards for operating tractors. So the first one on the right-hand side there, 1920.51B1, is a requirement to have roller protected structure. So taking a look at your tractors and make sure we have roller protected on that. And there again, the note there as it states, manufactured after October 1976. So there again, if you're telling me, well, you're not sure what date your tractor was manufactured, there again, you take a look at the model, take a look at the serial number, and we can gather that information. Because that's what we're going to do when we come to your site. When you tell us, you say, oh no, it was manufactured in 1970. Then we're going to do some research on to verify when that was manufactured. But all tractors manufactured after October 1976 are required to have a roller protected structure, or ROPS. Also looking for them to have seat belts. Make sure employees are trained on how to use the seat belt, how to adjust the seat belts. And the last one listed there on the page, 29 CFR 1928.51D, making sure employees are trained and the operator's instructions. And there again, we do have on our Appendix A of this part specific requirements that have to be done. Training must be done at the time of initial assignment. So before you put that employee up on that tractor to start work, you have to review Appendix A with them, and that has to be done on an annual basis thereafter. So what am I talking about? I'm talking specific here, subpart C, Appendix A. So all these items here all 9 items listed here have to be reviewed with the employees before initial assignment, before you place them on a tractor, start work, and then annually after that. You want to train employees on all 9 of these items. Wearing the seat belts, working on, and specific to terrain at your location, so those slopes, those terrains. And the biggie 2, do not permit other employees to ride with them. So if there's a seat on the tractor, that's the seat we're using. We want employees or sitting on the fenders on these tractors. Also, if you expect employees to do maintenance on these tractors, make sure they're trained on the hazard. So if they're going to remove a cover, make sure, and they got to do some greasing or got to change out a chain or a belt on this tractor, make sure they're trained on how to service that piece of equipment and shut that down. And make sure they're trained to put those covers back on so we don't have any exposure to these ingoing nip points or these chains and sprockets. If they're expected to refuel and to refill the batteries on them, make sure they're trained on the hazards of that. Also be aware, under New York State rollover protected structures, there's a retrofit program, and it was mentioned earlier in the presentation by Jim with the New York State Center for Agriculture, Medicine, and Health. They have developed a retrofit program for these ROP structures, and you will rebate up to 70% of the cost for purchasing and installing these structures. Number 6, guarding the power takeoffs. There again, we do have specific agricultural standard for this, for the protection of the power takeoffs. And there again, talking about exposure to those power takeoff shafts. They have to be guarded. You got to guard employees from them power takeoff shafts, because there again, we've had a lot of accidents, serious accidents, for employees being and got caught by these unguarded power takeoff shafts. And so just showing some illustrations here. And so the bottom left there showing it right there at the tractor itself, not guarded. And then showing you on the right where we have proper guarding of the shafts. And then be aware, again, New York Center for Agriculture, Medicine, and Health has developed a PTO retrofit program to replace those damaged or missing PTO shields for the tractors. Number 7, so guarding of all the other power transmissions and equipment that are on the farm. So as listed there on the bottom left, so our augers, our conveyors, our barn scrapers, our ventilation fans, our TMR mixers, all the other farm equipment, which is also covered under 29 CFR 1928. Making sure we guard these pieces of equipment, so our ingoing nip points, our chains, our sprockets, and just showing some examples here, augers, our scrapers, our sweeps and mechanisms, all moving parts, equipment on our farm need to guard. And then another illustration here, some photos here. So top left showing you a belt and pulley. There again, guarding the ingoing nip point. Concern there if you have fans. There again, we're talking about fans. If it's below 7 feet, we have exposure to employees in a walking working surface. Make sure they're guarded. If they're up above 7 feet, that's not a concern as long as we have no employee exposure. And then over on the right, showing you actual conveyor, that may be a chain and sprocket, or it could be a belt and pulley. Okay, making sure we guard the employees from exposure to these moving parts. And then 8, if we're going to be servicing these pieces of equipment, and there again, controlling that energy, so making sure the employees are not exposed to being crushed, struck by, caught in between, or entangled in these pieces of equipment. We need to shut these down. We do have a Pacific Agricultural Standard, which is 1910.57. Also, you could use some guidance document as shown on the right. Take a look at your manufacturer's instructions for working on these pieces of equipment. Make sure we're shutting them down. Make sure whoever is working, servicing them, locks them out and has control of that piece of equipment. Another document that will assist you as far as developing and lockout, tagout procedures for working on these pieces of equipment. You could take a look at, as far as the best practice, take a look at General Industry Standard, which is 1910-147. And that talks about actually writing procedures, okay, and talks about what to do, individual protection employees, and what to do as far as shift changes or putting a piece of equipment out of service, and then doing actual audit and review of those policies, procedures. And that's considered the best practice under 1910-147 to assist you in developing those procedures. Number 9, hazard communication. There again, So all those chemicals are being used on that farm. We need the information. So we need to do a walk around. You need to walk around your farm and make a list of all the different chemicals, be it gasoline, be it caulking, motor oils, all the different things that are being used on a farm. You need to walk around and make a list of everything that's being used on the farm, and then you need to get all your suppliers or your big box store where you're purchasing these chemicals, these materials, and get safety data sheets. And then we need to sit down with employees and train them. And there again, you do have a agricultural standard, which is 1928.21 as communication, and that does reference and require you to comply with the General Industry Standard, which is 1910-1200. So have you taken a look? Have you put together a plan? Have you walked around your farm and made a list of all the different chemicals being used? Have you taken a look at the safety data sheet and determined how you're going to protect your employees? What types of personal protective equipment do they need to protect them from the exposure to these hazards that they're working with? And as it states there, what's in your foot bath? Okay, what chemicals are being used in your foot bath? Have you taken a look at the label? Have you taken a look at the safety data sheet? What are you doing to protect your employees? So again, need the safety data sheet, want to make sure everything we have is labeled. Now there again, specific to labeling, as far as you're not chemical manufacturers, you're not importers. You're either getting a chemical in a 55-gallon drum, or you're going down to the gas station to fill up a gasoline can. The key with all your containers, if you're going to take it, say we go down to the gas station and we fill up a 5-gallon container of gasoline, the critical thing you have to do for all your secondary containers is to tell us what it is. So in that case it would be gasoline, and tell us what the hazard is. So if we're talking gasoline, we're talking about a flammable. Or if you purchase something in a 55-gallon drum and now you put it into a smaller container, again, tell us what it is and what the hazard is. Also taking a look at the safety data sheet for that chemical being used. Is it a corrosive? And if it is in fact a corrosive, then we're going to need to provide an eye wash station, and we got to provide 15 minutes of continuous flow to flush out those eyes. Because we don't want, as shown in the bottom right of this slide here, just a little bottle that's mounted on the wall. You're not going to be able to flush your eyes for 15 minutes. We need to be able to flush your eyes out. So take a look at the safety data sheet for the chemical that's being used and what the requirements to do in case of emergency. Also taking a look, can we use something that's not as hazardous? So for example, here showing you, are you using formaldehyde in your trays there for your foot wash, for your cows? Could you use something that's less hazardous? Because be aware, formaldehyde is on a list of carcinogens. It does cause cancer. So be aware of that. Is there something that's less hazardous can be used to protect our employees? And we're going to take a look. So in this case, if on that hoof tip, are you using formaldehyde? Could you use copper sulfate? Or could you be using hydrogen peroxide and an acid mixture? What are you using? Could you use something that's less hazardous? And you need to take a look at those safety data sheets and gather that information. Because now when you're starting to use that, we're going to take a look and see, we're going to talk with employees, have them walk us through the operation of what they do and what their exposure is to the chemicals being used. So in this case, we're showing it formaldehyde exposure. We got an employee pumping out that formaldehyde into a 2.5-gallon jug. Then after they fill it into a 2.5-gallon jug, the employee pours that into 2 separate foot baths for the cows. So with that operation, we're going to take a look at that and seeing are the employees actually being overexposed to that formaldehyde. So we're going to talk with the employees, have them tell us, walk through the operation of what they do, and then we're going to make a determination, are the employees being overexposed to that chemical that they're using? And are they being properly protected? Again, just a note for you all, we did revise our hazard communication standard back in March of 2012. Now the chemical manufacturers and importers are now putting out new labels on their products, which is a lot more information. And there again, we give them until June of 2015 to put out these new labels on their chemicals, to put out new safety data sheets, which now have a lot more information, and we actually give them an extra 6 months till December 2015 to get rid of all the old stock. But there again, as you all, as farmers, as employers, you need to make your employees, hey, there are chemical manufacturers are now sending out their chemicals with new labels on them. We're starting to receive new safety data sheets, so make employees aware of that. But again, as I stated before, you don't have to put these new labels on your secondary containers. The only thing you have to do with your secondary containers is tell us what it is and what the hazard is. Number 10, confined spaces. There again, we do not have a specific agricultural standard for confined spaces. So again, we're referencing the 5A1 of the OSHA Act and showing the fact we do have a serious hazard. There again, potential for asphyxiation, inhalation, engulfment, or caught-in hazard where it may exist when now employees are entering into our storage bins, our vertical silos, our hoppers, or cleaning out the manure storage vessel or that milk vessel, or going to that below-grade manure collection system and maybe replacing out a pump. So our guidance document is going. We do actually have an ANSI for that, for requirements for entering confined spaces, and they're having you take a look. And are you evaluating these spaces? Do you expect your employees to go into these spaces? So make a determination. You need to walk your farm, walk your site, and make a determination to where are my confined spaces. Have I made my employees aware of where these confined spaces are? Am I labeling these spaces, or do I have them part of a plan where I have them listed where all these spaces are? And do I expect my employees to go into these spaces? If I expect my employees to go into these spaces, how are we going to protect them? Same way too, just showing you here is going into those vertical silos. Now we have potential exposure to hazards. We're making access, getting entry in and out of them, the different gases, could be the moving parts, systems, electricals, and fires. So as far as a best practice is something that could assist you all as far as developing a program. If your employees in fact need to enter into these confined spaces, take a look at a general standard, which is 1910-146 or 1910-272. So assist you in identifying your permit required spaces, assist you as far as developing a program, policy, procedure if you in fact need to enter into these spaces, and how you're going to protect your employees, and what are you going to do in case you have an emergency and need to get the employees out of these spaces. Number 11, horizontal bunker silos. There again, do not have a agricultural standard for horizontal bunkers. Okay, so looking at 5A1, there again, our concern there is potential serious or fatal engulfment or struck by hazard may exist where employees perform facing activities. So when they're removing that silage from the ground level, or a serious fall hazard may exist where employees climb up on top of the silage to place or remove the protective plastic covering and anchoring systems. So there again, with these horizontal bunkers, we do understand, you filled these bunkers back in 2013, and they're all, nicely covered up now. So we understand you're now getting to a point we're going to start to uncover these. But the critical thing you want to take a look at is take a look at your bunkers. Do we in fact have damage to them? This may be the sidewalls. Bottom right there showing you a danger for now uncovering that. Are you allowing employees to stand right at the edge? Okay, so now we're uncovering these. We don't want to see on the top right there, we have employees actually in the bucket of a front-end loader. You can't be doing that. As I spoke earlier, as far as using any piece of equipment, you got to be in the operator's seat. You can't be in the bucket. So what are we doing with our employees? What are we doing as far as training our employees? So we're looking to you, and now you're at the point now where you've probably been doing this for months, uncovering the silage itself. But what we want you to do is now train your employees to get back away from those edges. So in that top left there, where the employee who's actually removing the tires, could they be back a little bit further? Could you use a rake? Could you use a pole, something to pull those tires back away from that edge, because we're concerned about potential for collapse. So looking for you to train your employees to make them aware of the hazards, potential collapse of that edge, make them aware of how to do that safely and not standing at the edge. Also with our as I shown in the previous slide, with our tractors that are going up onto this, making sure we have our tractors, make sure our tractors have the ROP structures, make sure employees are wearing their seatbelts, so we do have an incident where now that tractor may overturn, that employee is now still sitting inside that cab and protected by that ROP structure. Oops. There again, this is something that we may see in the future. We don't have it right now, but this is something that you want to take a look at down the road as far as having some type of guarding on these horizontal bunkers. There again, I haven't seen this out there on farms at this point in time. The only thing I'm seeing at this point in time is where I have horizontal bunkers, where I have the covering. But what we want to do, as I showed you before, if you're going to be using those tractors on these horizontal bunkers, make sure the employees are trained, make the employees aware of the hazards on the horizontal bunkers, make them aware that there's a very dangerous to be standing at the edge. So looking to train the employees, making sure that we discuss with employees as far as the proper removal of the plastic and the retire of the tires. Make sure you discuss with your employees as far as working near the face of the bunkers, or actually using the defacer to remove the material and taking that samples. Make them aware of the hazards, make them aware of the potential hazards, and train employees and get them back away from these edges and these fall hazards. And again, we do understand that it may be a situation right now where you've taken and you've piled your silage up past those exterior walls of the horizontal bunker. But we need to train employees of the hazards. We need to train employees of proper use of our tractors, make sure employees are wearing their seatbelts, make sure those tractors have the ROP structures to protect employees. Also moving on, looking at bale storage and handling. There again, we don't want to see an instance where we're stacking the bales and now they're leaning to one side. Employees are expected to walk past that. Make sure we safeguard our employees, so stack these properly. If we do have some that are leaning, make sure we train the employees to walk away from that. Don't have exposure to these improperly stacked bales. And it would be great if we had this situation where there was storage of best practice here. We had a nice storage barn for them. They're going to not only protect them from the weather, but they're out away from employees, and we don't have employees exposed to the hazard of being struck by the bales. Also, too, when we're now here with our system that we've set up, we're now going to step over the PTO, just potential confined space entry here. Okay, so what are we doing? Train employees, making them aware of the hazards. Also with noise, are you taking a look and see employees are not being overexposed to noise? Do you have that tractor where maybe the muffler fell off and now, or the bearings are going on that motor, on that pump? Take a look to make sure employees aren't being overexposed to noise. And there again, do not have a specific agricultural standard. looking at our guidance documents here, looking at our ANSI standards, protect employees. So again, a review, taking a look for all our equipment that are being used there, make sure employees are properly trained on use of equipment, make sure we have our ROPS on our tractors and employees are in fact wearing the seat belts, make sure all their PTO shafts are guarded, and then all of our other equipment, our Farmstead equipment, our pumps, our pulleys, our conveyors, make sure all those guards are on all those belts, pulleys, and sprockets. Also taking a look, there again, we do not have a specific standard for doing a hazard assessment as far as PPE. We do not have a specific agricultural standard for that, but we would reference at 5A1, and there again, listed below, this is a good reference for you, taking a look as a best practice, following our general issue standards here, for taking a look for the hazards employees are being exposed to and providing protection for them. Also, as I stated earlier, with the chemicals, though, taking a look at the chemicals, taking a look at your safety data sheet and what requirements need to be to protect employees from the chemical hazard. But on this one here, I highly recommend that you all do is walk your farm, walk your establishment, take a look what hazards employees are potentially exposed to and how are you going to safeguard them. Or, in this one here, are your employees actually utilizing drugs for immunization for your cows, your cattle that you have on your farm? Have you taken a look at the safety data sheets and what's needed to protect employees when using these, administering these drugs? Also, just again, review, taking a look at our milkroom hazards. There again, not particular in this photo, but you may have problems with slippery floors, electrical hazards, tripping hazards, chemical hazards, lighting, cow kicks, or compressed air. A lot of potential for a lot of different hazards in a milking powder and milking area. Also, too, out in your shop, where you're making all those repairs, all that equipment that is being used on the farm, many hazards employees may be exposed to if they're actually working on a piece of equipment and not properly blocking it, supporting it, using compressed air, doing welding operations, making that repair, cutting a piece of equipment or grinding, doing electrical work, or just the storage of all that equipment in that shed. A lot of potential hazards going on in that machine shop or that shed. So with that, as far as resources, all the different standards I discussed with you today, a lot of information can be gathered from our website at www.osha.gov, or you can give us a call. If you're looking as far as someone to come out to your establishment, take a look at your operation, and give you ideas on how to correct these conditions, there again, eyes with Federal OSHA, we cannot do that. You can give us a call. More than happy to discuss any subject, any concerns you have over the phone. But if you want somebody to come out to your establishment, first of all, I highly recommend your insurance carrier. Have them assist you. Highly recommend the different agencies, and as folks here that are sponsoring this webinar, give them a call, have them assist you. Also be aware in New York State, the 21D on-site consultation program, which is listed here in their offices throughout New York State. There again, these are the people that can come out to your establishment, come out to your farm, make a walk-around inspection with you, make recommendations to how to be in compliance with our standards at no cost to you. There again, New York State tax dollars are paying for this service. The only thing is, if you point out things, they point out things, you want to correct those conditions in agreed time period, which you all discussed. As long as you take those corrective action, correct those conditions, great job, they'll give you a certificate, and they'll be on their way. But if you refuse to correct those conditions that you pointed out or they pointed out, you're not going to correct those conditions. They can make a referral back to us, to Federal OSHA for enforcement. So be aware of that. So with that, I've completed my presentation.
Ron, nice job. Lots of information there, and it has generated some questions. So I'm going to work through those, and I suspect some of them are short answers, and some of them might be a little bit more involved. So first question, how long should a farm expect an inspection to take?
It's going to depend on the size of the farm. So I cannot give you a specific time period. So if we're there for part of the local emphasis program and we're keying in on these dairy dozen that we just reviewed, if you're a large farm, it could take a few days, but if you're a small farm, it may just be one day.
Okay, next question. Is the forklift certification required or a recommended best practice?
Yes, with the use of fork trucks, it's a recommended best practice. So there again.
Next question, are there regulations for measurements of rails and such for push-off points into manure pits?
So with, we do reference an ANSI standard as far as railings, and we're talking railings for anywhere we have a potential to a fall hazard. Standard railing heights are 42 inches plus or minus 3, and then a mid-rail would be half of that, which is 21 inches.
Okay. Are you allowed to use circuit breakers as switches if properly labeled for, say, lighting?
There again, there is no requirement by OSHA. We do not have a specific general standard. We reference the general duty clause and looking at the National Electric Code. So long as you're maintaining those circuit breakers in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, that's not a problem.
Okay, next one. If a milk truck driver is at your farm setting the tanks up to wash and they are not using PPE, will the farm have any responsibility? So outside service provider is on your farm engaging in a certain practice.
So any outside contractor, we're looking at them and their boss, their establishment, their company to provide safe and health work conditions for them. We only look at the farm for that if the farm takes on the responsibility as an employer-employee relationship.
Okay, is there a recommended distance from the face of the silo that workers should be trained on? WI has a video that says 10 feet.
Okay, so we're talking specific to, you're talking specifically a horizontal bunker?
I think that's what they mean, yes.
There again, there is no set distance. It's going to be up to the individual farmer to make that determination based on the product that's in there to put the employees back. So we're looking for them, you know, the greater this is, the better. You know, if they could get them back 4 to 6 feet, you know, that's great.
Okay, can OSHA ask employees to demonstrate jobs that they do?
There again, we will not ask them to demonstrate, especially if we see that there's a potential for a hazard. We want to put any employees in harm's way. We'll have a discussion with them about a specific task.
Okay, are there any expectations for fire extinguishers?
Only expectation for fire extinguishers is if there is they expect employees, they want employees to use the fire extinguishers. So what is the policy of the farm? If there is a fire, is it the expectation that all employees are to fight or to flee? So if employees are to flee, there would be no expectation for fire extinguishers. But if you're telling the employee, no, I want you to, if there is a fire, say it's small incipient stage fire, I want you to use a fire extinguisher, then yes, if they're going to use fire extinguishers, then employees have to be trained on how to use a fire extinguisher, and they would need the specific fire extinguisher depending on what type of fire it is, what we're trying to combat, the ordinary combustibles, flammable liquids, or electrical. So it's up to the individual farmer to make that determinations. our employees going to fight or flee.
Okay. If hazmats are stored in a specific building, does there need to be signs on the outside of the building?
Signage on the outside of the building, that's a recommendation as far as to assist the local fire department to make them aware of what the hazards are inside that building.
Okay, and this one I think might be a follow-up to a previous question, but I'll let you interpret context, Ron. Is it sufficient to chain off and label with a sign to not enter? And I'm guessing that's some area that could present a hazard, or maybe, again, the hazmat.
So to chain off, to keep employees out of harm's way, there again, we cannot cite unless we can show employees exposed to a hazard. So this sounds like a means that the employer is going to use to keep employees out of harm's way.
Yeah. There are several questions here about the availability of the slides in the presentation afterwards. Christy will explain that at the end of the program, but the answer is yes, this material will be available online. We really appreciate you making use of it again with additional members of your farm team, but also referring it to your neighbors and so forth. So I'm going to answer that one. So the next question, what will the protocol be for corrections that need to be made? Will a fine occur immediately, or is there time allotted to correct?
If it's a serious hazard, then yes, there will be a proposed fine. So even if the hazard was corrected during the inspection while the inspector is on site, if it's found to be a serious hazard, it does have the potential to have a fine assessed with it.
Based on what you've shown us, Ron, what might be, very likely to be considered a serious hazard, just to provide a little, kind of what is and what isn't?
So there again, based on the most probable resultant injury. So if I'm talking death or serious physical harm, so if I have a situation where I've got employees operating a tractor or the skid steer, and now it's, for example, for the lagoon, they could drive right into that lagoon and drown, that can be considered a serious hazard. And average serious hazards coming out of the Syracuse area office last year were approximately $2,500.
Okay, if you hire outside vendors for some of these tasks on the farms, are you required for their training as well?
If you hire an outside company, there again, we have to show an employer-employee relationship. So if you have a contract with an outside vendor or outside contractor to do work, that's just a contract. But now if you take them on as an employee and now you're directing their work, now we could show that there's an employer-employee relationship and you could be cited.
The next one, I'm going to read it as I've got it, and maybe you'll be able to kind of interpret a little bit more to it, Ron, but it says, entering an area with a guard missing, and then alley scraper at end of barn. I guess the questioner is raising a particular situation and perhaps asking how you would view that.
So he sounds like maybe an employee may be on a skid steer with a scraper, and now they're pushing the manure into an opening or into a pit. So they removed, maybe it was a walking working surface and they had railings or chains up so nobody could walk in that area. But now they're not walking through that area. They removed the chain and now they're scraping material using a skid steer. There again, we'd have to show exposure to that hazard. So as long as they're inside that skid steer, there's no exposure to that hazard. we have to show exposure to the hazard. So in this case, employees now inside the skid steer, inside the tractor, no exposure to the hazard.
If we're getting to the end of the questions, so in a couple of minutes I'm going to introduce our next speaker, but 2 or 3 more here. If part of a fan is below 7 feet to the working surface, does the entire fan have to be guarded, or just the part that's below 7 feet?
Just the part that's below. We have to show exposure to the hazard.
Okay, you primarily focused on dairy farms. Would these same rules apply to other farms with over 10 employees?
Yes.
And last question, Ron, you've done a great job of working through these and very good questions. Appreciate it from those who've texted them in. It's a follow-up to the fire extinguisher question, and I'm going to interpret it a little bit, but if the employee instructions are to stay and fight the fire, so there need to be fire extinguishers, would you be looking at the locations and the distances of those fire extinguishers?
And there again, let's be critical here too. What are we talking as far as a fire? So if we're talking a small incipient stage fire like a garbage can, I want to be clear here that we want employees to call for assistance first before they start operating fire extinguishers, because what we don't want to have happen is, I'm going to ask the question, how many fire extinguishers are you going to empty before you call for assistance, call for help? So it's very important that the employee does call for assistance before they even use that fire extinguisher. And there again, as far as the spacing and location, we do not have a specific standard. As far as a good practice, I recommend you take a look at the National Fire Protection National Fire Codes, and you look at specific to Section 10, which discusses maintaining and placing of fire extinguishers. Also, you can follow OSHA standard, General OSHA standard, which is 1910-157. It also talks about maintaining and spacing of fire extinguishers. But those are recommendations for best practice.
Okay, there are a few other questions, but I'm going to move on here so that we have proper time for our next speaker, and he is Carl Zimick, and again, he is a repeat speaker. We always enjoy having him as part of our programs. Always has good practical information, has a long history both growing up and working in the New York dairy industry, and is a nationally recognized expert in the areas of environmental and other types of compliance requirements. And so with no further ado, Carl Zimick.
Good morning. We just pull my few slides up and we'll get going. Okay, I just have a few slides to talk about a particular point about can folks join OSHA on a farm inspection. Before I do that, I do want to mention one of Ron's last slides. He mentioned some resources to help farms with compliance, and I did want to mention that there are several organizations that went through a training program put together earlier this spring between NETPA and NICAM and other organizations, and folks from Champlain Valley Agronomics and ACS are trained in offering compliance assistance services, and also Lisa Ford went through the training, and she's going to be working specifically with Cuba marketing folks. So I did want to mention that as well. We've got some new folks on the scene to help farms work through some of these issues. Again, specifically, who can join OSHA on an inspection? I just want to make it clear, this question arose from a situation last fall or late last summer where we understand that an OSHA inspection based on a complaint or an injury, OSHA asked to bring an outside person to join on an inspection of a New York dairy farm. And the question arises, does OSHA have this right? And we, working with OSHA authorities, we confirmed that OSHA indeed does have that right to bring in outside experts. The federal regulations and their field manual allow this, and this has been tested in court. And so it's pretty clear that OSHA is able to do that, and they call these folks walk-around representatives. But there are particular circumstances that OSHA is allowed to do this. And in the case of the inspector determines there is a need, it may be because they feel they lack the proper expertise for conducting an inspection, maybe qualifications for some sort of process or testing that they might be undertaking during the inspection or follow-up. Maybe there's a language issue. For example, they don't speak Spanish. Pretty much, from our understanding, it's really special circumstances where OSHA might be seeking to bring in a walk-around representative. So OSHA's told us they typically do not use walk-around representatives in any inspections in any industry, and we were told that it's very unlikely that a walk-around representative would be used in the New York Dairy LEP that'll be beginning this summer. Also want to point out that in an opening interview, the OSHA inspector needs to be declaring whether they have someone outside of OSHA staff that is joining. And of course, for the farm manager, it's always would be useful to remember to ask about affiliation of anybody that's attending if that hasn't been pointed out to you during that opening interview. So the other question is, well, what if the unlikely happens, that a particular farm situation, OSHA does feel like they lack the expertise and want to bring in a walk-around representative from an outside organization. So the employer, in this case the dairy farmer, does have the right to challenge the presence of a walk-around representative, and that employer can refuse entry, though the employer should understand that this could escalate a situation. Our understanding from talking with OSHA is that if an employer refuses entry or challenges the presence of a walk-around representative, OSHA will evaluate the circumstances, reevaluate, and determine do they really feel like they need to bring this person in, or will they carry out the inspection without that person. And OSHA may in fact proceed to go without that representation, or they could seek a warrant to bring that representative in. It's at their option. And really that's all I have on that issue. It's, again, our understanding is that this situation is very unlikely to occur in the local emphasis program for dairy in New York, but again, producers have been asking us about this, and working with OSHA, we were able to get some clarification on the situation. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jim and Christy.
All right, thank you very much for that additional information, Carl, and we'll wait a moment or two and see if any questions come in. I'm going to go back to Ron, though. I do have another question for him, and back on fire extinguishers, looking for a little more clarification. The question is, if I train all of my employees to flee rather than fight a fire, then I don't need any fire extinguishers anywhere. And then fuel tanks, tractors, other flammables such as oil. Can we, and that's the question, and then I got another one after that.
Okay, so there again, we have to show exposure to the hazard again. So if employees are not going to fight a fire, they're just going to flee, then there's no exposure to the fire. Now, I hear your second part of your question, which is talking about if employees are expected to refuel a piece of equipment, or employees are going to operate a torch where they have acetylene and oxygen. Then if they going to have a fire, it's going to occur, are they expected to put that out? Now, there again, in our general industry standards, we require if you going to use a flammable gas or you're going to use a flammable liquid and you're going to be refueling that or using that, you have to have a fire extinguisher available. We do not have a agricultural standard for that. So the question is, if they're going to be using that equipment, we highly recommend if they're going to be using a acetylene oxygen torch, or they're going to be refueling a tractor, a lawnmower, piece of equipment on site, they have a fire extinguisher available when they're doing that refueling or using that piece of equipment.
Okay, I'm going to go to Carl with the next question. Can we require the walk-around representative to provide credentials, a name, so that we can do a quick check on whether they may be an animal activist?
I don't know that for sure. I would think you certainly could, and I would think that OSHA would not support, having someone there secretly or declining to indicate their affiliation. Would that be correct, Ron?
That is correct. And we would do the same thing. If we're coming to your site, we're going to show you who we are and explain that. And you have the right to call back to our office and ask and verify who we are.
Next question, Carl, what right does a farmer have to deny access to the farm if the OSHA inspector passes signage at the entry point requiring them to contact farm management, for example, a biosecurity sign or the like?
I'm not sure if I'm interpreting the question correctly, but it sounds like if they pass the sign that's at the driveway saying no unauthorized entry, can you kick them out if they pass that sign? I wouldn't think that would be the case, but as I understand it, and again, I may need to look to Ron on this, as I understand it, the OSHA person would enter the operation and look for, an office or a place where people would be able to determine who to contact.
Right. We're going to make, and we're going to look for that main office on that farm. We're not going to just wander around the farm and then come back to the main office later. We're looking for a management official and a main office.
With that, we're going to wrap up the questions and really appreciate everybody listening in this morning. Again, this information will be available. I actually have a couple more here, so I'm going to go back to the questions. And a question for Ron. My understanding is that these inspections will be conducted randomly across New York State. Roughly how many inspections in 2014 will OSHA conduct under its local emphasis program? How many in 2015?
Cannot answer the question as far as specific number, because there again, these are program plan inspections. So remember, it's like in Syracuse area office, we're covering 24 counties. Our first priority are all unprogrammed planned events. We're having our fatalities, our accidents, our referrals, our complaints. Under this program planned local emphasis program, in the LEP, it talks about doing a cycle. A cycle is 3 inspections per area office. So I'm talking specific to Buffalo area office jurisdiction, Syracuse area office jurisdiction, and Albany area office jurisdiction. But it does not say in the local emphasis program how many cycles they will complete. And yes, these are random selection. So we're going to select from a universe of all farms in New York State, and you apply a random number selection to that to select the farms to be inspected.
And another question, Ron, and I'm going to let you interpret around it a little bit, but do the OSHA reps just drop in?
There again, we do not call you and tell you we are coming. The only time we're telling you we're coming is if you call us, because if you had a fatality or a catastrophe. Other than that, we're going to come to your location, look for the main office, look for the management official, have an opening conference, and tell you why we're there.
I'll give you another question. I suspect you're going to say you don't cover this area, but will the inspections reach into the New England states in the near future?
No, not at this time. This is a local emphasis program for New York.
Okay, that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Christy Schmidt to give you additional information on how to access today's information. Again, thank you very much to both presenters. I know these are difficult issues to talk about, a lot of emotion and complexity with them, but appreciate your being well prepared with the initial material and then responding to a lot of questions. So, Christy, wrap us up, please.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining today. Up on the screen right now is information as to where you can access the recording, as well as a PDF of Ron's slides from today. So that's farmcrediteast.com/webinars, and that's up on the screen. My email address is also up there, christy.schmidt@farmcrediteast.com, for any follow-up questions or suggestions for future webinar topics. That's it. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.